Hello, welcome to the Sunday Politics in the West. Coming up, is it one mayor too many? We've got Lord Mayors and elected mayors. Soon we'll get a West of England Metro mayor. There's also a new American president, of course, just in case you didn't know. We did think of inviting him on the programme today, but he's probably building a wall somewhere. And anyway, we're only interested in A-listers on our little show. So we have two people who've won bigly in Bristol. They are Charlotte Leslie for the Conservatives and Kerry McCarthy for Labour. Welcome to you all. Charlotte, do you think that Donald Trump can make America great again?
Well, I think expectations are so low, maybe we're going to be pleasantly surprised. I think we have to keep calm and carry on, not panic. That won't help anybody. He's there for a reason. People might lament yesteryear when Obama was there, but actually that regime is what led to to Trump being here now. So I think we just have to see what happens.
He's a Conservative, though. A fellow Conservative.
He's a Republican. That's a slightly different thing. And he speaks, obviously, he does speak for a lot of people in America. And I think it is a mistake just to dismiss all those people and how they voted. That never ends well. How he's going to respond is going to be very interesting. And I think we just have to try and make the most of whatever happens.
Well, we've seen protests already. People have been out saying build bridges and all that. Do you think you should give him a chance?
Well, we have no choice because he's been elected president, and like it or not, he's there for the possibly not for the duration. But I think, you know, I mean, it is hugely depressing, particularly when I don't agree with Charlotte when she says that Obama's 8 years has led to this. You've got to remember that Hillary Clinton actually got nearly 3 million more votes than Trump did. So you can't say it's a sea change in political
with the
opinion.
Working class of
he
America,
has connected with
and,
particular demographic.
You must look at Mr. Jeremy Corbyn and think, well, if a billionaire can connect with the working classes, why can't Mr.
This
Corbyn?
is always this odd thing. It's like Nigel Farage, who's public school educated, stockbroker, very wealthy, is somehow seen as the voice of the working class in the UK because he is photographed drinking a pint of beer. And I think there's a real issue about, you know, a bit of a disconnect between, certainly on the left, the appeal to the metropolitan voters, if you like, and then the vote to the, what you might call the post-industrial working class, people that have lost their jobs in the big factories. There's not that sense of cohesion anymore and feel a bit abandoned. OK, and he does offer optimism, doesn't he? That's perhaps a message. Do you think he does? I would think his message is all about who he hates and who he's against. And, you know, Obama was all about hope, Clinton was about hope. And, you know, I just think Obama was such a decent, dignified man. You know, I would hope that Trump doesn't just destroy that legacy. Well, it's interesting times ahead.
Brexit means Brexit used to be the catchphrase trotted out to deflect difficult questions about our future outside of the EU. But this week, the Prime Minister shed more light on the issue. If you know your single market from your customs union, then you might feel better informed. But businesses here have been complaining that they're still in the dark. Here's Robin Markwell.
What I am proposing cannot mean membership of the single market.
It was the week when her words echoed across the West's factory floors.
We will pursue a bold and ambitious free trade agreement with the European Union.
Through depots and warehouses.
Brexit must mean control of the number of people who come to Britain from Europe.
And around trade fairs.
No deal for Britain is better than a bad deal for Britain.
Assembling such a complex trade deal inside 2 years will require this sort of speed and precision. But while we wait for negotiations to start, change is already happening.
Speak to any firm in the West that does business with Europe and they'll tell you that Brexit is already having an impact on their firm. It's down to the weakening value of this, British sterling, as compared with this, the euro.
These caravans are being fitted with a German chassis and Dutch windows. Since the referendum last June, there's been a 15% rise in the cost of those materials. That's now being passed on to the customer, with the price tag for a new caravan or motorhome up 5%. The costs might be rising, but bosses remain upbeat.
One of the upsides for us is a weak pound means that overseas holidays are more expensive, and as a result, people will holiday in the UK, which is good for us. The staycation phenomenon will continue.
A weak pound makes life tougher for those who import goods, but businesses at this food and drinks fair in Bristol this week were being urged to send their products abroad.
Look what the pound's done since Brexit. The pound has never been as weak, well, not for decades, as weak as it is now. Our products, people love our products. They've just got 20-odd% cheaper. There is no legislation at the moment, or very little. Crack on and try it.
But the political turbulence isn't to everyone's taste. The bank HSBC is moving 1,000 UK staff to Paris. At this sports clothing distribution business near Bristol, they're thinking on similar lines. Boss Charlie Allen isn't taking on any new staff until the deal becomes clearer. For him, any end to free trade might mean moving some of his business abroad. At the moment, he ships in skateboarding clothes from China to Bristol, where they're hit with a 12% tariff. He then distributes them on to markets across the EU. The single market means he pays no further fees. But he worries Brexit might mean new trade barriers with Europe, which is why he's costed out starting up a new warehouse in the Netherlands.
It's a huge decision, and it's a decision we won't make until we can see where the negotiations are going. We hope to be able to keep all of our warehousing here, but it all hinges on the negotiations.
He's also worried for his staff. A third come from Europe, and he's offered to pay for them to become British citizens. He says it's to reassure them that they can carry on living here.
I preferred it when we just used to sell skateboards. I'm not interested in the politics, and ultimately it's had a huge impact on our business like it never has ever before.
In London and on the Swiss slopes of Davos this week, the Prime Minister made things a little clearer, but still not clear enough for some West Country businesses feeling they face an uphill battle.
That was Robin Markwell. Well, Charlotte, what mandate has the Prime Minister got for a hard Brexit when the country was pretty evenly split on whether we should leave the EU?
Well, I think you can rehearse whether a referendum result means a referendum result. There was a majority in favour of leaving. We do face a challenge of a very divided country now with a section of the population
So was she right
grieving.
to say we're out of the single market, possibly out of the customs union, the whole works?
The independent think tank Open Europe, which has been neutral on this and just pragmatic, said that her speech was a masterclass in common sense. And I think what she was doing is she was looking at the realities and doing her best to make it work for Britain. You can't base what you want to do on a fantasy. However much we might want the world to be something else, it isn't. And as we saw in your clip, yeah, there are some really difficult challenges to overcome, but there are some tremendous upsides, particularly for Britain, but also, don't forget, for emerging economies like Africa, for whom Europe has been a real barrier to trade. Britain now has a chance to do deals with them that will help lift those countries out of poverty. There are real opportunities.
But leaving a market of 500 million people. Carrie.
Yeah, and I think the problem was that we still, we had a little bit more clarity from Theresa May, but she just outlined 12 objectives in her speech. It was a wish list. She's now got to go around 27 European countries and get them to agree to this, and I just simply don't think she's going to get the deal. It was a very positive speech about this new era and global Britain. These countries aren't going to sign away. We can't go into these negotiations saying we want all the good bits and we don't want any of the bits we didn't like. And that still seems to be the negotiation stance.
Was there anything at all that she's prepared to give up? Because we want complete access to the market. We don't want to pay anything into it. We don't want free movement. I mean, what cost will there be?
I think a really important point she made is that a lot of this and a lot of the success of Europe, and she said we want a strong Europe, which I completely agree with and hasn't been said enough in the past, is in Europe's court. So she was saying, look, we're really up for being pragmatic and we really want you to succeed as well. Let's see how we can make this work. And actually an awful lot of this is a choice for Europe, whether it wants to punish us because it's very proud of its project or whether it wants prosperity and pragmatism. And that is in Europe's court now.
So the pragmatic thing is for them to give us everything because we want to be friends.
But the pragmatic thing is to do a deal where we do well, they do well. And do you know what? Often it's said that Britain wants something for itself that other countries don't want. But Britain, I think, would say to any other country in Europe that wants to play to its strengths and not be part of a homogenous, glued together whole, that you can do that as well.
OK. Kerry, do you accept that this was about immigration? This is what caused it, and this is what Theresa May sort of understands.
I think certainly during the referendum campaign, a lot of people who voted leave voted because they had concerns about the level of immigration in this country, and I think that is something that does have to be addressed. So total freedom, so this is why, you know, the whole discussion about membership of the single market would mean you sign up to the 4 freedoms, which would include freedom of movement. I think everybody, or almost everybody, accepts that we do have to address that. But you do also have to acknowledge that a lot of the businesses, we heard from a business on that clip that has a lot of European workers working there. The food sector, the farming sector, across the southwest, there are a lot of companies that absolutely depend on that labour. So that has to be, that case has to be made as well.
Leads on then very neatly to the next question, is that do you accept that you got it wrong on immigration, and what is Labour's position on it now? Do you think it should be cut back drastically from Europe, or do you think there should continue to be free movement?
Well, there's several issues to this, and
there's only one question.
Well, it's a bit difficult to unpick because you have immigration.
Really.
Well, it is because you partly in Bristol, in the Bristol scenario, a lot of immigration would be people who are refugees, so asylum seekers originally from Somalia.
We're talking about people moving from Europe. Do you accept that
when they voted and expressed their concerns about immigration, they weren't just talking about Eastern European immigration, they were talking about immigration across the board. So you do have to look at it in the round. I think that what hasn't been answered is how we square that, where people sometimes justified, sometimes unjustified concerns about immigration, how you square that with actually the need for migrant workers in our workforce.
I'm not really about whether you think there should be European immigration.
No, I think we need European workers. I think there's so many businesses that spoke to me, the food sector. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some restrictions, but I am saying that we cannot just close the doors to Eastern European workers.
Asked and answers from you both. Will you vote to trigger Article 50?
Yes, I will.
And will you vote to trigger
I very much doubt it.
You won't?
I think unless Theresa May comes forward with a white paper, with clarity, unless she explains how on earth she thinks she's going to manage to get this deal on the table with about 18 months of negotiations.
Mr Corbyn said on Friday that he expected all Labour MPs to support triggering Article 50.
I'm aware of that.
You're a rebel, aren't you?
Well,
okay.
Where did I learn that from?
I can't think.
No, I think it's a serious issue, but I'm going to give it a lot of consideration.
Okay. 900,000 people in the West will soon be getting a brand new type of political leader, a metro mayor. In May, voters will go to the polls in South Gloucestershire, Bath and North East Somerset and Bristol. Most of the main parties' candidates have been chosen for what should be a high-profile job, but they may struggle to get voters interested. Here's Paul Baltrop.
The West already has plenty of mayors. Most perform ceremonial roles for our towns and cities. The region's only elected mayor so far is in Bristol, where Marvin Rees succeeded George Ferguson last year. But the new Metro Mayor will be different, covering Bristol, South Gloucestershire and Bath and North East Somerset, but with separate powers handed down from central government over things like transport, strategic planning and adult education. That, so far, failed to make an impact on many voters.
To be honest, I don't know.
I've heard that there's the process, but I don't know whose is.
The 3 areas have different needs and so on. It doesn't seem a good idea to me.
No, not aware. No idea.
It's different for those involved in the West politics. They have been focused on it since the 3 councils voted for the change last summer. They know the result is far from a foregone conclusion.
Based on the votes cast across the 3 council areas in the last general election, the Conservatives, who came well ahead, reckon they're favourites for the Metro Mayor contest. But go back to 2010, and it was the Lib Dems who came first in that year's vote. And Labour know the area can be good for them. They got the most votes in the 3 previous general elections.
Local elections usually see the party in government suffer at the polls, but the Conservatives hope to buck that trend. So there was a smile on the face of South Gloucestershire councillor Tim Bowles, who was yesterday chosen as their candidate.
Genuinely, absolutely thrilled, but more importantly, humbled. It was an amazing turnout. Terrific to see so many people. I know the other 2 candidates, got to know them well. We've been talking at length. There were 2 other brilliant candidates. I was really surprised to learn from everybody else how many other good quality candidates we had.
Labour's selection of Leslie Mansell, a momentum-backed left-winger, has pleased the other parties, especially the Liberal Democrats. 2 are competing to be their candidate.
former council leader Simon Cook and the ex-Bristol West MP Stephen Williams, who feels they're on the up.
Asked me a year ago, could the Liberal Democrats aspire to win an election across the West Country? I would have said no, we're going to need a lot more time to recover. Maybe by 2020 we will have done. But the referendum vote, the Brexit outcome, has transformed British politics.
Morale is very, very bullish, and there's a smile back on our faces. You know, we've stopped being disillusioned and rather sort of disgruntled. We're up there, we're fighting, and we're going to win.
UKIP's candidate is Aaron Foote, but the party are likely to concentrate resources on other, more winnable contests. It's different for the Greens, who have a dozen local councillors. They've selected their former parliamentary candidate for Bristol West.
And I think Bristol and Bath is one of those places where people are aware of the next generation. They're aware of the pressures from climate change. They're aware of the need for jobs that are going to be resilient in the future. So yes, I think we've got a really good opportunity in the Bristol and Bath area.
All will now be getting out campaigning, but the hardest task may not be so much winning electors over as getting them to actually vote.
The biggest problem is that this is going to be the fourth election for the electorate in 2 years. And I do strongly suspect that we could see turnout as fall below 20% for this election. And I think that is going to be very, very difficult for all of the parties.
The candidates have just over 100 days to sell themselves and the new role to the people of the West.
Right, so we've got another election coming up. Does anyone sort of want a Metro Mayor, do you think, either of you?
I think they want the things a Metro Mayor could accomplish.
Which is what?
Here's a crazy idea, a joined-up transport strategy for the region.
Don't be ridiculous.
A Metro Mayor, I'd like to see, I think that a Metro Mayor could actually accomplish that.
But would they be senior to the mayors of the different areas? Were they senior to Bristol Mayor, for example?
Well, I think the real problem is, you know, one of the arguments for having the mayor in Bristol is that at least the public know who is accountable, who can they look to, who is running the city. And Marvin is well established, as George Ferguson was before them. People know who they are. I worry that the Metro Mayor will be some obscure person that no one's quite sure who they are, what they do, so you don't have that accountability.
But who is your candidate?
It's Leslie Mansell.
And would you put her in that category?
No, well, look, I think it's about it's not about the individual, it's about the way it's structured and the fact that how do you establish yourself in such a role? I think any individual is going to find it difficult because people just won't understand when we're campaigning. I mean, it might be that once they're in post, but you see this with police and crime commissioners. You know, we get very low turnout in elections. And a lot of people just don't realise why they're there, what they're doing. And I think there's a problem, a bit of a democratic deficit with that.
That's a reasonable point, isn't it? That, you know, there's voter fatigue, and also we've got mayors, so why do we want another one?
No, I think there's two issues here. It's having another election, do people know what this extra mayor is? And I think we're all going to have a big effort to explain that to people.
And not long to do that.
And not long to do it. But, you know, we've risen to the challenge before, and this is the first time the role's going to be there, and we'll be voting for them again. Next time people will have an idea of who they are, like we had with the Bristol mayor. But then there's secondly what this mayor can do and make the role their own, and I'm sure the role will evolve. I think there's huge potential. I think Bristol region misses out again and again because we haven't spoken together like regions like Manchester have.
But we could have had a transport authority in the way that most of the other big cities have always had these passenger transport executives, which West of England could have had that and just have the leaders coming together. We've just always tried to do it on an ad hoc, messy basis. We don't need
viewers
a
will
mayor for that.
remember Avon. I mean, is this actually a way of bringing back a sort of an Avon authority, really, which can look at the big issues across a wider area?
No, I think things change, and Kerry and I both campaigned for a transport authority, but it didn't happen. So maybe a Metro Mayor is going to be a change that enables that kind of decision-making to take place, because we've been banging on that door for years and it hasn't happened.
I think there is also
the
problem.
This was
sort of imposed on people, at least with Bristol and the mayor. We had a referendum. We were the only city, I think, that all the other cities rejected the idea of a mayor. But this is something that we've pretty much been pushed into doing.
And that personality, whoever it is, will have to get on or have to come to a working arrangement with the leaders of the other smaller authorities. Now, that's, given historic differences between the local authorities, that may not be easy.
It may not be easy, but I think a Metro Mayor could be in a very good position to do that.
Okay.
And I think the candidate's key task should be to bring areas that think their interests are very different together to see ourselves as a wider region.
Would you consider going for it?
I wouldn't. I'm extremely happy being an MP, and there is more than enough to do in Bristol North West and in Parliament to keep me busy for a while yet.
So that's a maybe? Or it's
That's a no.
All right. Thank you. Now, let's take a whistle-stop tour of the political news this week in 60 seconds. Bristol's other Banksy, Aaron Banks, launched an anti-establishment news website. The Brexit campaigner said Westminster would shake up the media. He was among just a handful of Brits to go to Donald Trump's inauguration.
They won't be afraid to bring in, news that other people perhaps don't find very palatable.
The man in charge of promoting business in Somerset sparked a row by getting a 26% pay rise. The local enterprise partnership said it put Chris Garcia's salary in line with others. Somerset Council leader John Osman claimed it was out of touch. Councillors in Bath say they're now looking at just 2 sites for the city's new park and ride. They'll decide next week. Campaigners oppose both. And more councils announced above-inflation tax rises. Baines, Taunton Deane and West Somerset will all be charging 3.5% more, saying the money's needed to fund social care. Well, that was the week that's flown by. Let's just talk about council tax and this referendum that they're holding in another part of the country, suggesting a very large increase in the tax. Is that something that Labour would support? After all, you've been asking for better public services for years.
Well, what we want is fair funding of public services, and the problem with pushing it down to a local level, devolving austerity, if you like, is that the poorer communities aren't able to raise as much in council tax as the wealthier communities, yet they're the ones that probably have more need for the public services. So it can be a bit unfair. I think it's always a combination of local funding but national funding as well, and that's why we're sort of making the case for a government funding to support Bristol, what Bristol needs. Marvin's got to find £100 million worth of cuts in 5 years. That's just not sustainable.
Charlotte, is there any excuse for continued austerity in local government?
I'm afraid we have to make efficiencies. Interestingly, the area of the country that's having the referendum, even if they up their council tax by, I think, 15%, they'll still be below the average national council tax and still below Bristol, which shows they've had real efficiencies and they're only rising their tax to an average level. I think Bristol Council still has enormous efficiencies it can make. I mean, if you speak to people...
Could you name one?
I'd like to see more information on what the City Council spends on consultancies and recruitment agencies, even during a time of recruitment freezing.
OK,
How much
we'll ask them. We'll ask them. And that's it from the West this week. My thanks to my guests, Charlotte Leslie and Kerry McCarthy. Please follow us on the Twitter for the latest political news from the West, and you can catch up on the iPlayer. This programme will be available there. For now, though, it's back to London and Andrew, who's waiting for us with the latest political news.